so great to be here. And firstly, can I just say congratulations to the Sustainable Angle, to Nina and Amanda and the team on what an amazing, fantastic event. I mean, post-COVID, this is really something. So thank you all, and congratulations on putting together something quite remarkable and very inspiring. I've been in this field for so many years. I'm not going to tell you how many years, but this is really something to see, and it is a great acknowledgement and show of how much we've progressed in the discussion and the implementation on sustainable fashion. So thank you all. My name's Helen Crowley. I'm a conservation scientist, wildlife biologist that has come out of the forest into the fields and has wandered through corporate sustainability. I was at Caring for a decade, helping their sustainability strategy and many other steps along the way. I'm now in a group called Pollination, which is a specialist nature and climate advisory and investment company. So this topic that we're going to discuss today, regenerative agriculture, is really sort of in the sweet spot of so many initiatives and so many of the goals and the outcomes that we need globally, but also for our sector, also for the fashion sector, the food sector as well. So let me just give you a little bit of context, and then I'm going to introduce you to this fantastic panel. I'm just here to provide a ramp for them to take off and fly. I might ground them if they go on too much, but they have so much to say. So we're going to go through the panel. We're going to ask some questions. We're going to leave 10 minutes at the end for you to ask questions about this super important topic. Just a little bit of context. Firstly, just looking at planetary boundaries over there, unfortunately, that diagram is a little out of date. We have now exceeded 6 out of the 9 planetary boundaries, not 4. So this idea of what do we do as a society, as industry, as business, and as investors, what do we do to bring us back into a safe operating space, a safe and just operating space for humanity? And one of the answers, time and time again, comes up: transforming our agricultural system, transforming the way we grow food and fiber. The way we grow food and fiber will not only generate food security and nutrition security and fiber security, it will also generate climate, up to 30% of the climate solution, up to a huge percentage of the biodiversity loss solution, stemming biodiversity loss, and the one that we don't often talk about, the pollution issue. It will also, transforming the way we use our land and the way we care for our land will also help mitigate the incredible pollution problems that we have all over the world. You'll learn from me that one of the things I do is I drink a lot of water when I talk because I put a lot of energy into my talking, so excuse me for a moment. So at the heart of this sort of new regenerative discussion of like, how do we transform, how do we go to a regenerative, restorative approach for agriculture, for fisheries, for forestry, for business in general, but in particular we're going to focus on the power of regenerative agriculture. And how do we do that so that we can have this food and energy and fiber security, and how do we do that within planetary boundaries? That's a little bit of what we're going to tackle today. And the role of us as designers, as people that buy clothes, as people that make clothes, as people who set the direction of trends in fashion. What is our role in really helping drive this change for regenerative agriculture? And what does regenerative agriculture actually mean to us, and what does it even look like? So we're going to tackle some of those really important issues in this panel. And there's a lot to say, but we're going to just sort of touch on it and help you understand, and then give you time to sort of reflect and ask questions from us about how we can really be part of the solution, not part of the driver of degradation and destruction and inequality, but flipping it around very quickly to being part of the solution. So we're going to talk about regenerative ag. What is it? How to measure it? The implications for design, the implications for farmers and stewards of our land and custodians of our land. What does it mean for our business models? And then how do we do it? And what are the things that we need to be thinking about? So I'm going to stop now. Thank you all for your attention, and I hope you stay with us in the next 45 minutes and have some really insightful comments and questions for us at the end. I'm actually going to start with Megan. I'm not going to introduce the panel. They are so much better at introducing themselves. So I'm going to start with Megan, who's going to introduce herself and just give a little insight into why she's here talking about Regen Ag. We're going to move through the panel, and then we'll dive deeply into some questions. Thank you. Over to you, Megan.
Hey, thanks, Helen. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Meiklejohn. I work at a program called Land to Market, and that was started within the nonprofit called the Savory Institute. The Savory Institute's mission is to restore grasslands and ecosystem functioning of the grasslands globally, and Land to Market was developed as this accelerator of that mission. So we're offering a market solution. We work with the farmers that are verified as regenerative globally and connect their raw materials and products to our brand members. And I specifically focus on the supply chain in order to help that flow through of materials actually happen. And I got into this space because before Land to Market, I was working on the brand side. I worked at Ralph Lauren and Eileen Fisher, very much focused on supply chain transparency and sustainable materials, really working to meet our sustainability goals, whether it be sourcing organic cotton, organic linen, or sustainable wool. And it was actually at Eileen Fisher where I dove really deep into this regenerative space. And it was actually... It really created a mindset change for me, and really I completely changed the way I thought about sustainability, because I was tasked with go get us some sustainable wool, and I'm like, okay, what does that mean? We're sourcing non-mules wool, which is nice, but that really meant that our yarn spinner was not sourcing wool from Australia, which we weren't addressing the root cause there, so it didn't really feel sustainable. It just felt like less harm, and this was around the time that the Responsible Wool Standard was coming on board. I was part of these meetings, just absorbing everything I could. And I was very lucky because Eileen herself said, just go out there, just go, do what you need to do. So I took this world trip and went to Argentina, New Zealand, and Australia, met with over 20 farmers, soil scientists, biodiversity specialists, saw the auction house, met with everyone that I could about wool. And luckily, my first stop in Argentina, I met with a hub of the Savory Institute, and that's where I just learned about holistic management, and I learned that this land that I was on was actually in a state of regeneration, and it wasn't degrading because there were animals on it. It was actually regenerating because the animals were managed holistically, meaning that they were managed in a way that mimicked how herds of animals would move in the wild. And that was just completely eye-opening, and it just shifted everything, because I wasn't focused anymore on low impact or reducing harm. I shifted that energy and put it towards creating maximum positive impact and restoring ecosystems through managing livestock this way. And so I dug in real deep, and I eventually now came over to Land to Market to do this work with all of our brand members.
Thank you. And we're going to dive in deeper on Land to Market. But given that Simon's just next to me and we started on wool, Simon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Helen. Thanks, Megan. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Simon from HD Wool. Thanks for staying till the very end to come and, I hope, come and see us. And I'm sure it's nothing to do maybe with the drinks afterwards, but thanks anyway for staying. Most unusual to see you all in headsets as well. This is the first time I've done a speech where everyone hopefully is listening to us and not the cricket or the tennis, perhaps. So anyway, good to be here. I'm really pleased to share the stage with everybody. And as Helen mentioned in the introduction, we want to talk a little bit about sort of business models. And we at HD Wool think the wool system here in the UK is broken. And we really stand for working direct with farmers and growers here in the UK and trying to pay farmers a fairer price for their wool. Wool over time has become commoditized, which is ridiculous. It's the original sort of performance fiber, and farmers are getting less and less for that fantastic fiber. So by working direct with them, we hope to pay them a fairer price for their wool, and by doing so, encourage the move over time towards regenerative agriculture practices. So working very closely with Land to Market, and our friends here at 3LM also. So really chuffed to be here. You know, if we can do that with farmers and growers here in the UK, and you know, help eliminate plastics, and also along the way sort of mitigate some of this you know, climate change that you know, we need urgent action on. That's fantastic. That's really what we're all about. So we'll talk a little bit more about why we're here and what we do when we take a deeper dive later on.
Thanks, Simon. That's great. We are going to dive into the business models because it's really, that's going to be key to this. But meanwhile, Sheila, can you introduce yourself, please? Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. My name is Sheila Cooke, and I, for a long time, have tried to understand what do we as humans need to do differently to live within the boundaries of spaceship Earth. In my own exploration of that, I've taken some twists and turns. In 1997, I went to Japan and I became a managing director of an industrial equipment company. And during my 5 years there were a number of food scares in dairy, in beef, even in spinach, and it really got me thinking about my food. And I started reading about food, and I decided, okay, I'm going to become vegetarian. Then in 2006, FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, came out with in the long shadow of livestock. And that influenced me to become a vegan, so I went vegan. And I thought I was doing the right thing to help planet Earth by doing that. Then in 2014, I watched Alan Savory's TED Talk of how to regreen the deserts and reverse climate change. And then I learned, actually we need livestock to help us in the mitigation of climate change. And it took me another year before I started eating meat again. But immediately, the day after watching that video with Alan Savory, my husband and I applied to become a hub with the Savory Institute, and so we're working now with Megan at Atlanta Market and with Simon at HD Wool. And our remit is the UK and Ireland. We're working with farmers here to help them learn how to manage holistically so they're regenerating soil while improving their social situation and improving their economic situation at the same time. And then we're helping them understand, are they actually regenerating soil? And we do that through ecological outcome verification.
Thank you, Sheila. And we're going to go into more depth on that too. Gosh, as the time ticks away. But now, Cate, please introduce yourself and set the scene of why you're here and how you're here.
Thank you, Helen. My name is Cate Havstad-Casad. I come today in a couple of different facets. I am both a producer. I have a farm and a ranch in Oregon. We are an EOV farm and ranch. We are a certified organic farm. We have been practicing biodynamic principles in permaculture since 2014. I'm also a designer. I have had a custom hat business based out of Oregon since 2014. And then recently I began a new design project, Range Revolution, and that's really what I'm here this week for. And Range Revolution is a regeneratively sourced leather luggage company. So we are building all of our products out of 100% land-to-market hides. So we're working directly with 3 partner ranches to bring their leathers into the supply chain and produce these regeneratively sourced bags. But quite frankly, the bag project is somewhat of a Trojan horse to get into certain environments and talk to people about regenerative agriculture, because that is where my heart lies. When we first started farming, we were a tiny little farm. It was about a 5-acre farm, and we were doing farmers markets and CSAs, growing a huge diversity of vegetables. And over the years, we have scaled our operation. So we are now managing 360 acres of land in Oregon in the high desert region. And part of why I am here today is that, or why I started Range. When I set out to build a bag, I wanted to find a leather source that aligns with the rest of my ethos, how I live the rest of my life. I wanted to find something from my region that was regeneratively produced. That was very naive at the time, but as soon as I dove into it, I realized that in our region of Oregon, and actually most of the United States, all of the hides coming from mid-sized family ranches are thrown into the trash. the supply chain just does not work on the aggregation at that mid-size level. So actually, the hides that are primarily aggregated are coming from the biggest economies of scale, which are the feedlot operations. If it's domestically sourced, a lot of the industry is importing hides. So that blew my mind, and I decided to work on healing this design flaw of our system. So I am working to bring more of these ranchers into the EOV monitoring program, which we'll talk more about what EOV is and why I believe so deeply in this monitoring. So yeah, my goal is to bring more ranchers into the EOV program and show them that there is a huge demand in the fashion industry for these hides that come with data that show regeneration on land. There's no reason that we should be developing all of these new materials when we have this most amazing and beautiful byproduct of an industry thrown into the trash.
Great. She just threw that one out there on the table. The leather gauntlet is now been thrown down. We will come back and address that. But Megan, let's focus a little on land to market, because land to market, Sheila's going to talk a lot more about EOV and regenerative grazing and the details of that. But why don't we talk a little bit about land to market and how that helps brands really understand what they can do in terms of regenerative supply chains?
Sure, yeah. So land to market is an outcome-based verification program. And we're using that scientific protocol that was mentioned called EOV, or Ecological Outcome Verification, as the protocol to assess whether the land is getting better or worse, essentially. And what we're looking at is different biological and ecological indicators of ecosystem health. So what sets us apart is that we're not this practice-based certification program. We're not telling farmers what to do or how to farm. It's not a box-checking exercise of various practices. What we're doing is saying, if you have a way of farming in this regenerative manner, prove it to us. Use this monitoring protocol year over year. And we have some level of confidence, like pretty good levels of confidence, that if you're using certain methods like holistic management to manage your land, and you're using that intentional rotational grazing methods, that you will start to see these positive outcomes. And we'll see that in the results. So we're looking at trends of data over time, these ecological indicators, and we aggregate those. And if we see those positive trends year over year, then the material coming from those farms is considered verified to land to market. And then it can be differentiated in the marketplace. So it's really good for consumers who understand the seal, and we're beginning to do a lot of education around that because it has that outcome attribute. And for brands, what we do is we work with them, do a supply chain assessment, understand what types of materials are they sourcing now, and how can we plug those regeneratively grown and verified materials into their supply chain with minimal disruption. We want to get the leather that they're using now and switch it out for the regenerative ones, which, as Cate was saying, they may just be disposed of or incinerated at the moment. So let's get the maximum value for that whole animal, the whole farm, so that the farmer receives the value of what they're doing. And right now, how we're working with brands at Land to Market is this fairly bespoke way. There's supply chain assessments, kind of doing a heat map. Where do we have volume that meets their volume needs and their quality needs? But one of our really big focus this year is to, while we continue that pathway, also create these more turnkey solutions so that we can really accelerate this movement and have this uptake of the materials. And so what we're doing, and one of the reasons we're even here, is we're meeting with suppliers, processors, so tanneries, yarn spinners, fabric makers, who are very values aligned with us and want to join in our ecosystem and become members and participate in keeping that material separate for certain customers. They can have better access to the raw materials. And just two examples here. We just signed on, actually HD Wool is our first supply chain member and has just been a great partner. We also are working with ISA Tantec, the tannery, who is really great at getting those hides and figuring out the logistics. They're working with Timberland on some projects. And we just launched a collaboration with New Zealand Merino and their ZQRX program. And this is really exciting because it is collaboration where we actually have two certifications and verification programs kind of merging so that they help each other out. And a lot of brands are already using that ZQ wool. Now they have the opportunity to also source the ZQRX plus land to market verified and be part of that group of brands who are investing in farmers and getting that monitoring and training to the wool growers in New Zealand so that they can assess their land and understand the indicators. And one last thing that I did want to say is the reason that we're outcome based and looking at these ecological indicators is because it works for the farmer. It creates this feedback loop. So if you're seeing this degrading land, you can react to that and change your management accordingly. Or maybe you don't see that upward trend that you wanted to see. You can go back and talk to other people. You can talk to people like Sheila, your local hub, and get that type of mentorship and training so that you're always experimenting and trying to make your land as thriving and fertile and as abundant as possible.
Thanks. That's great. I think we'll segue back to Cate. I think this really important point about restoring degraded land. People always say there's not enough land, but in fact 70% or more of our land is degraded, so that we actually have a lot of land that needs restoring. So that's really important that this regenerative approach is there. So Cate, I'm going to flip back to you, and you have a slide or two that you want to show, but I wanted to, given that we're talking about supply chains and how to help, you've got a sort of a perspective from designer perspective and some other things you want to highlight. I'm just going to say to all my panelists, we've got about 4 minutes to do this little bit if we want to allow time.
Yeah. So I'm just going to quickly show you some very tangible outcomes of regenerative agriculture. Like we're talking about, yay, soil health. How does that actually translate to farmers being resilient through climate change? Because we are living through it. It is not just like this concept. It is an embodied experience for us and the survival of our crops. And actually this whole industry's supply chain is reliant on our soils being resilient to huge climatic shifts, huge heat waves, huge drought, and huge influx of water at once. So how are we going to make the soils more resilient so that fashion has cotton and good linen and good leathers? So this is just an example. This is one of my mentors' ranches. They've been practitioners of holistic management for a very long time. This middle picture here, this is a piece of land that has been under holistic planned grazing for 2 years. This was the ambient temperature on this day, 47 degrees Celsius. The soil temperature of this land that has been managed holistically for 2 years, you've got 64 degrees Celsius. And then this land here that has been managed holistically with this planned grazing approach, 32 degrees Celsius. Same day, same region, completely different soil temperatures. That's the difference between regeneratively managed lands and healthy soils, is they can buffer against huge climatic extremes. This is the same ranch. They have not irrigated for, I think, 8 years. So what they did, they are conservation ranchers. They have leased all of their irrigation rights back to the river. They're trying to restore the salmon habitat in their region. So they do not irrigate, but they do holistically graze their cattle strategically. You can see their land here on the left. Without irrigation is green. This is a golf course that is heavily irrigated. Everything else all around it is brown. This is because of holistic planned grazing. The world is talking a lot about carbon right now, and of course, carbon is a huge part of this equation. I know for us in the West, and I had a lot of conversations today with people around the globe, we're all dealing with extreme drought. So in addition to, is the soil healthy? Are we sequestering carbon? Is our water able to hold water? We have firsthand experience of the difference in the water holding capacity when you have biologically alive soils. For every 1% of soil organic matter you increase in your soil, you can hold an additional 20,000 gallons of water. This is just another side by side. Again, no irrigation on the left, no irrigation on the right. So yeah, how should I segue into?
Do you want to wait and come back? You wanted to talk a little bit about from a design perspective, or we
Yeah.
could go to Sheila and talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of.
Yeah, let's talk
given
about.
that you've sort of introduced the details of regenerative.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
we'll
we'll
come
return to
back.
design,
We're going
yeah.
to come to Simon on
Yeah.
business, but like it's really important, right? That soil is alive. It's got biodiversity. Without biodiversity, it's dirt. Okay, and we need the biodiversity. Just another little take home. Sheila, would you like to talk a little bit more?
So what is regenerative
Yeah.
agriculture? A really simple definition of it would be to work with nature. And I'll give you an example. So it's really common for livestock farmers to have their calves and lambs born in the winter. And there are lots of problems associated with that. Lots of lambs and calves die. It's too cold, for example. But Gabe Brown, he's a holistic managing farm in North Dakota. He decided to look at his deer in the local habitat. When are they having their fawns? And it's much later in the year. It's in the late spring, early summer. So he decided to have his cows calve at the same time as the deer. And that is reflective of what nature is doing. And the benefit is the mothers have no difficulty giving birth. It's the right time of the year for them to give birth. They don't lose calves to the cold weather. And the grass is flush, so the mothers are producing good, rich milk, plentiful milk for those calves. And lastly, because the deer are fawning at that time, the predators have wild fawns to eat, and they don't bother the calves so much. And so there's so many benefits when we learn how to farm with nature. And then, so how do we know? How do we know that we're actually regenerating land? Well, nature is one great big process, and we can look at early signs of change. Cate has talked about water, and so we can observe how effective is this water cycle? How effective is this land at soaking up every drop of rain? That's observable. We can also look at how fast is the mineral cycle, and how well are we converting sunlight into plant biomass, and how functioning is the community dynamics. The more complex the plants, the animals, the microorganisms in the soil, the insects, the more resilient that land is to drought, to flood, to climate change, and anything that we would do adversely to the land.
Lovely. Thank you. So, wildlife friendly is part of it as well. Living harmoniously with wildlife on farms. That's another element of all this. So, Simon, let's go to the business side, right? Because I'm sure there are a lot of people in the audience going, this sounds great. There's nothing to not support, but how do I make this work in my supply chain and my business? What are the trade-offs, if any?
Sure. Great. Thank you, Helen. May I have the...
Oh, that's right. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
that's
You have
okay.
you've got a couple of slides
does
too.
work.
See if
Let's have a
this
look. No
works.
problem.
Is anyone okay, Johnson?
Hold on. May we have our slides? Doesn't matter if we don't. There we go. Thank you very much.
That's right.
So I will be quick because, as Helen said, we do want to leave some time for questions at the end. You've all valiantly stayed here, and I think it's really important you get a chance to throw some questions towards us. So, firstly, just echoing also what Helen mentioned at the start, hats off to Nina and the team for curating this brilliant exhibition, more than exhibition really, this gathering. You know, I'm ancient, I've been to hundreds of different exhibitions, and honestly this is a really good quality, pioneering event in terms of the level of panelists, not including myself, and data that you're all having access to here. So, absolutely fantastic to the team for doing this. Secondly, before I jump in, I think, as you mentioned, Helen, we're going to talk a little bit about the sort of business side. I'm a stupid sales and marketing guy, so I'll talk to you about business. But what the team have set up here has really resonated for me, and I think, Sheila, you mentioned it there about how do we know? For me in regenerative agriculture, I'm quite new in this space, coming from the world of synthetics before I joined the sort of natural fiber space. And I've learned a lot in this sort of last 18 months, 2 years, from many of the panel up here and some of you in the audience. And I think Sheila's encapsulated it there in terms of what's really great about savory, land to market, because regenerative is such a hot topic. It's about through that particular method, data-based knowledge, methods, and knowing that we're actually making progress towards more regenerative practices. So thank you for encapsulating that. In terms of HD wool, why do we exist? Why are we here? Really important to sort of state that. A couple of things that or a couple of reasons why we're here. One, as I mentioned at the start, we really want to support British farmers and pay them more for their wool. By doing that, we hope to help them move towards more regenerative agriculture practices. Secondly, of course, we also want to contribute to this urgent action we all need to take in terms of, climate, etc., and hopefully reducing plastic along the way. And the next challenge for us is to really demonstrate the carbon sequestration benefits of replacing polyester with our product. So this is a really key part of why we're here. We're very quickly, we're a sort of 130-year-old startup, if you like. I hate that expression, but I thought I'd use it this afternoon. We've been around a long time, so we know wool, and that means we can save you, our customers, a lot of time and energy when it comes to helping you develop the right sorts of products for your end uses. Customers are now coming to us and saying, can you help us get out of plastic? Can you help us get out of foam? Foam is terrible. We need something else. So we've evolved from being a sort of a fiber trader, if you like, to one that's now making more and more components, value-added components with wool. So taking out plastic from insulation, from mattress pads, filtration, seating, and replacing that with wool or natural products, and supporting our producers and our customers here in the UK. We do that through our Wool Keepers quality assurance and sourcing platform. So this is our unique platform that integrates with third-party certification schemes that we've touched on here, including GOTS and Red Tractor and other areas. Really important to have that involvement from third-party certification schemes and standards to help us manage the wool and also provide the traceability back to the farm. So we can trace back to groups of farmers that contributed wool to products, be they mattress pads or insulation for garments. And final thing probably to say on that is traceability is great, but it's useless just for being traceable. It needs to be pushing something and trying to change something. And the change we're trying to support by being traceable and offering traceability is the move towards more regenerative agriculture practices, because we think maybe consumers don't fully understand what that means now, but with the help of the panel up here, etc., in a few years' time they will be. They'll be asking for things that are more planet positive, that give back to the planet rather than just take out.
Thanks, Simon. I think that's also another really important thing to underline is the embedded value in these regenerative raw materials, the carbon, the biodiversity. It's embedded in those materials, and then as a buyer, you can claim that embedded value and articulate that beyond just the material into the product. So thanks. I did say I want to come back to Cate because you had some perspectives sort of from design that you wanted to share with us, and then we'll open up. We've got so many questions. I have a whole list that we're going to ask the panel, but I want you to have the chance to do that. So think of your questions, and Cate's going to give us a couple of minutes from a design perspective.
From a designer's perspective, what I'm seeing at the show and understanding is that there are so many different potential certifications and seals you could choose to put on your label. Our clothes are a wordless dialogue of who we are and what our ethos are. And when you're speaking to consumers, you have a glance to communicate that in your products. So I understand people are trying to understand, what is this certification? What is this, how do I best communicate what our brand stands for? And I want to clarify, the Land to Market program is backed by the EOV data. So the EOV data is what we gather when we're monitoring our landscapes. And then the Land to Market is the consumer-facing seal that we communicate this data and regenerative outcomes to the consumer with. So I came to EOV first and foremost as a farmer and a rancher, and I experienced firsthand how powerful EOV was for us as producers. We had been practicing organic, biodynamic principles for a very long time, but the framework of EOV gave me a lot more than just a seal or a certification. It gave me a whole new framework to think about what our holistic context is as a farm and a ranch. And I want to give an example. This season, Since we moved to our new farm in 2017, we have had an 80% reduction of our irrigation waters because of drought conditions. That's a huge reduction of the most critical resource to farm in the desert. So we have had to shift and evolve. What kind of farmers are we? What is the land asking of us? And what are these times asking of us? We have gotten very good at growing potatoes. We grow over 200 tons of potatoes a year organically for restaurants and grocery stores in Oregon. We have a lot of pride in being really great potato growers. When we looked at this year and what our water allocation was going to be, we had to ask ourselves, are we going to dry up 70% of our land under management to bring 30% of it to fruition, vegetables? Or do we need to rethink what kind of farmers we are and take into context our region, the climate, and honestly, what our biggest purpose is, which is to make the greatest ecological impact in the time we have on Earth. So we have more or less given up our potato production, which was hugely emotional. There's a lot of pride. There's been a huge amount of investment. We have built up markets for these goods, but it's what we had to do. And instead, we have adopted widespread grazable cover cropping programs, and we've expanded our grazing operation because in our context of a high desert and very brittle environment with not enough water, it was the right ecological choice. So EOV has empowered us as farmers with this framework to think about things with that holistic context as the central pillar we return to. And that, in a design sense, is what I am doing with Range Revolution. I'm not going to build things that don't align with that center pillar of what am I here to do on Earth with my very short and precious time. And it's to have the greatest ecological impact with this very precious life. So I just wanted you to know, in this world of verifications, you have to ask yourself, how does the certification or verification benefit the producer? Is this just a consumer-facing thing that the fashion brand is going to benefit from? Or is this a feedback loop that is going to make more resilient producers, more resilient soils, who can look at their landscape with a new framework to understand what is the right ecological decision and make those decisions themselves, not waiting for some top-down organization to say, this is how you should do it. That's not empowering to the farmer, and frankly, the farmers won't like that attitude. So that is my reasoning and my belief in EOV has been a critical resource for us to learn from what is happening and make the right decisions that align with the holistic context.
Thanks, Cate. I think one of the points you make is really important also. It's about supporting the decisions that farmers have to make on the land as custodians of the land are hard, and they're high risk often. And so what we need to do is really, there's been 12,000 years where farmers probably haven't benefited that much from the economy and from the supply chains. We've got to innovate around that and help them benefit more through these regenerative models. So that's a really important, and build a narrative through that. So I'm hoping that you have questions. I do have questions as well for the panelists, but I'm opening up the floor now to questions to see if anyone has anything. That we've talked about wildlife friendly, we've thrown down the gauntlet of animals on the landscape, of business model transformation, of empowering farmers. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I've got to be careful to hold this close, but it sounds really loud in my ears. Hi, I'm Christopher Stokes from the Global Organic Textile Standard. And the question for the panel, I know that Cate's talked about her organic activities quite a lot, is, in my view, organic is advanced regenerative. It already does, through the standard, an awful lot of clear outcomes, well evidenced. And so it's just some reflections from the panel on the way in which organic is advanced regenerative farming. Would be really interesting. Thank you very much.
Yeah, who would like to? Sheila?
Maybe Cate.
Cate, would you like to? Or
I can
go for Megan.
Yeah. I think with organic, it's very complementary with regenerative. Like I mentioned, we're taking an outcome-based approach, so we're not looking at practices, but those practices, if you're using a lot of toxic inputs, pesticides, insecticides, it's going to cause degradation. We will absolutely see that eventually. If not, like probably pretty early in the outcomes. So I think they go hand in hand. I also see that we can't be so perfectionistic about our approach, and it's really hard for a farmer who may be reliant on certain inputs to just all of a sudden stop and become organic. So I think regenerative, in the just not just for land to market, but in the entire sense of regenerative and all the initiatives going on, it allows that on ramp for experimentation and to see what works, what doesn't. Is holistic management maybe a better framework? Is the ROC a better framework? I think we need to allow farmers the opportunity to see what works for them. And for some, it's going to be organic, and others, it's not. And maybe they can eventually get there as a North Star.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, while we're moving there, did anyone else want to add a quick comment on that? No? You okay? Okay, another question, please.
Hi, thank you. I'm Meta from Nicholas Kirkwood. We're a shoe brand. This is not a shoe-related question, but I've been on my own journey of sustainability and zero waste and all of that. I am not going vegan because I still believe leather is an amazing material and wool as well. But I am wondering, is there a place for vegan or is there a place for a regenerative agriculture that doesn't rely also on meat consumption and dairy, or at least the harmful values, but is it still economically viable to do regenerative agriculture without harming animals?
That's a good question. Sheila, can I ask you to respond?
Yeah, so the question is it viable to do agriculture without animals?
Regenerative agriculture.
It can be with animals, but maybe without relying on income on meat production and dairy. These are the two things that I find kind of as harmful, but I don't mind wool shearing or beeswax or stuff like that. So you can still have animals on the farm, but just not kill them prematurely.
Okay.
If you can afford it.
Yeah, this is what I'm kind of asking. Is it possible, or do you think that kind of meat industry and dairy industry need to be a part of the regenerative agriculture?
Maybe you want to address the economic, but I'll just address the soil question. So Cate mentioned this word brittleness. We need to understand the word brittleness. So brittleness is a scale for measuring landscapes from a 1 to a 10. And a 1 is like a rainforest and a 10 is like a desert. As we move towards the brittleness end of the spectrum, which is about roughly 60% of the world's land is brittle, that land definitely needs livestock in order for that soil to be healthy. Why? Because our agricultural lands, all of our agricultural lands used to be grasslands. In some cases forests, but mostly they were grasslands. And grasslands co-evolved with wild herbivores and predators in a dynamic called the predator-prey connection. And it was the predators keeping the wild herbivores bunched up and moving in these huge transmigrations across continents that grew healthy soil and healthy grassland. And that's what's become our agricultural land today. And what we've substituted for those animals then is all these petroleum-based inputs. And that's what's degrading the land. And so if we want to remove all of that, we do need to find a way to reintegrate livestock. But maybe you want to answer the economic question.
Yeah, the economic, this is again why I have such respect for a holistic management mindset, because you have to take into consideration context to answer that question. The answer for me in the high desert of Central Oregon will be different than the answer for somebody who lives in Georgia. So we live in an area that, a lower production of grasses, very cold in the winters, so we have to feed our animals all year long. Can we afford to hay and feed animals that are essentially just going to be co-conspirators and pets? We can't afford that. We have to have an industry supporting the keeping of those animals. But perhaps somebody who is in a higher production area in a different context than us, perhaps they could. If grasses just grow more freely, it might make sense in their context.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're coming down to the last less than 2 minutes. So you know where to find these fabulous people, and we're all going to have drinks and circulate so you can ask more questions of them. I think we touched some really important topics, but I am just going to give 30 seconds to each of them on the sort of magic wand question, the final parting, the sort of takeaway message, or one final thing that you would like to say about the topics that we've covered. So I'm going to start with Megan.
Okay.
There's the clock.
Okay, I'll be fast. If I had that magic wand, what I would like to see is a change in the rhetoric in this space. We talk about things in very binary nature, like animals are bad and plants are good, and this is sustainable and this is unsustainable. But that's hardly ever the truth. As you can see with those brilliant answers on that, like that very good question, we always have to think about the context. So I would encourage anyone who's in this industry and focused on sustainability to get curious and really understand the systems that we're managing and the complexity that's involved, and also understand the system that we're operating within. Because once you start really learning and figuring out how it all works, you'll start to see these windows of opportunities for engagement, and to have like that strategic change for you as an individual or for the brand that you're working for.
Good magic wand, abracadabra.
Yeah.
Fewer industry product certification schemes.
Hey.
Good one. Nice and short and snappy, and that's a conversation opener. Sheila?
I'd like to see the whole design world collaborate and work together and see yourselves as pioneers. You're pioneers for Spaceship Earth. And farmers, at the end of the day, are business people. And they will change when there's economic sense to do it. And you have the power to do that. But I think collaboration would be key for making that happen.
Lovely. Cate, final
Magic
word.
wand. There's this phrase that I've really held on to recently in both food and also in fashion. We need to make the better bigger, and we need to make the bigger better. And I think we do that together. So I think we have an advantage as these small, little scrappy companies that have more flexibility to pivot and kind of do what we want with less risk involved than a huge organization with lots of stakeholders involved. So if the big brands could start partnering strategically with smaller brands with more nimbleness also who are doing important regional work in their areas, you can be empowering these movements all around the world to grow and grow. Because what's happening in these small regions is this work is happening that's going to benefit all of you. We are building up the supply chain. We're bringing more ranchers into EOV. There'll be more regenerative hides for you. It'll benefit you if the bigger brands start strategically partnering with smaller brands, helping them get bigger, and in return, them helping the bigger brands get better.
That's a good finishing one. Thank you so much, everybody. And a round of applause for the fabulous panelists. Thank you for your attention. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well done. Well done, everybody.